Welcome back to the MovieBabble podcast. It is me, Brennan, here hosting, and we got all the way from Melbourne, Australia, MovieBabble's very own, and the host of another bloody movie podcast, Sean Coates. How's it going?
Doing well, doing well. Nice and sunny outside, even though currently in lockdown, can't really do much about that. But wouldn't be anywhere else other than outside, obviously, than here chatting with you, Brennan, about Toronto International Film Festival.
For sure. Yeah, I'm very glad to have you on, and I'm glad that we can cover the festival here just for MovieBabble. It was a good experience for me. I mean, we're going to get into a lot of different things. Obviously, we're going to talk movies. We're going to talk the online versus in-person experience. We're just going to talk about a lot of the kind of technical difficulties as well that went along with this festival. But this is the second Toronto International Film Festival that has ran during the pandemic. Last year was very much a hybrid festival with online options, in-person options, and drive-in options. They kept that same system this year, but there was a lot more exclusivity than there was last year. Last year, if you could find a movie online, you could probably find it in person, vice versa. This year, movies were definitely a little bit pickier about which route they wanted to take, and we will get into all of that. Firstly, though, as someone, what's our time difference? 14 hours or so?
14 hours. It is currently 11:34 a.m. on a Thursday morning here in Melbourne.
9:33 p.m. on a Wednesday evening here in Ontario, Canada. And it's just such a big difference. But the one thing that COVID-19 has brought us, which I mean, nothing good about this virus at all, but the fact that film festivals are now kind of globally accessible in a way, I think it's definitely been a little bit of a positive. This is not your first festival during the pandemic, but where does it rank, would you say, in the festivals you've kind of experienced?
Now, when you say that, do you mean in terms of the films that I watched, or in terms of the experience of how the festival sort of run,
Let's say
or a bit
experience
of
overall.
both?
Experience overall.
Overall, I think given the circumstances, they've done pretty well. Personally, the festival that I think that has adapted the like best to the sort of environment, and although I didn't get a chance to cover them this year, was Fantasia Film Festival, which, funnily enough, was the last time I was on this podcast with Nick when we did a similar sort of festival wrap up episode last year. But Toronto, from what I heard as well, last year they had a similar thing as well in terms of inviting international press to, or just press from anywhere. So the TIFF Digital Cinema Pro, which is I think the platform that they use, that was I don't know if it's I don't know how different it was to just the general TIFF Digital Lightbox sort of platform that they used, but a lot of the films that were put on there were only given 48 hours to watch, and being someone that is halfway across the world and with Australia's notoriously terrible internet speeds, it made watching some of the films very difficult, especially during certain hours of the day. Made it, and I think the time differences might have affected that, because maybe they used Canadian servers or something like that. So like high traffic times in Canada were very, very not that great in terms of the streaming quality that I would get. Like buffering every couple of seconds, having to put it on auto, and having to, I guess, sacrifice watching the film at a lower resolution just to be able to get through it in a reasonable amount of time. And also as well, I guess, with some of the films being on the like a lot of us people who got accepted into press, like we knew as soon as the program dropped how many of them would be available in which countries, because it was all listed up on the website. And then once we got our login details for it, that we then found out most of those films were then found to be not available in your country, which
It's
was
That's frustrating.
frustrating.
Yeah, that's
Was
very
frustrating,
frustrating.
and because they have very strict rules against using VPNs, and I just was not going to take that risk whatsoever, because I want to get invited back to this festival, so I wasn't going to do that. But yeah, so a lot of films like I think a lot of films that you ended up seeing too. So films like Petite Maman, Power of the Dog. There's a lot of others. Flea. I know Flea was never available in Australia, but a lot of others were available for, and it was that were So a lot of films that were available to a lot of countries, like a couple of days before the festival, then changed to only US and Canada, which was frustrating. You know, they are opening it up to international press, but not necessarily all international press.
Right. And that's tough. And firstly, we see I think there was a lot of backlash from critics online because in the summer or in August or so, we saw TIFF come out with the list of what would be available digitally, what would be available in person exclusive. That pissed a lot of people off. Um, then things kind of settle, you kind of get used to that sort of thing. And then, as you said, a couple of days before the festival, they switch up all the movies that you're able to see and you're not able to see. To me, I don't think that's right at all. I understand personally theatrical exclusivity. I like it's something that it's there. Like Dune's not going to be on the digital platform for TIFF,
Yeah,
right? That's just
definitely.
yeah,
Like neither is Last Night in Soho or any of the other like the big sort of gala films. Like I'd accepted that.
yeah,
I think, and I understand as well that like certain like rights holders and distributors with other country with in like other countries as well like sort of stop that as too. But I think it was just the fact that like we had already made these plans to watch these films and then they got changed without any notice. That was a bit of a letdown. But in that, but there was always a positive that came out of that because in doing that, I was able to watch. A lot of the films I watched are films that I probably would not have been on my radar
hmm
otherwise.
yeah. That is definitely positive. We spoke about that just over text as the festival was going on. That you said, there's a lot of movies that I probably would have never have watched that then you got to, and that's a good thing as well. Um, I saw a lot of people kind of use that as a positive, and it is certainly a positive. That yeah, maybe you couldn't see Power of the Dog at TIFF, but you got to see a lot of things that you probably would never have seen, and you like them quite a bit. So, on that note, let's get into the fun stuff, which is the films that we did see. So going into the festival, like this is my third TIFF, and this one I definitely this is one where I've seen more than I have in any prior one. The first year I went was definitely very much a weekend event for me, and then last year I kind of watched a lot of the digital stuff throughout the week, maybe one a day. This year was certainly a grind, 2, 3 movies a day. I didn't stick it out the whole 10 days, but first 5 days or so, I was definitely really into this festival hard. I know a lot of people that watch like 5, 6 a day, which I couldn't do that, but and I'm glad I didn't do that because I don't think I could digest all those films. But
Yeah, that's a bit crazy. Like you see people like at the Melbourne International Film Festival, which because of lockdown was cancelled and moved online. Which, I mean, normally when a film festival is online and I'm not really covering it, like I only covered one film for MIF this year for the site, and it's just maybe it's just as well because I was tight for money at the time. It's just like no, it's just not the same. It's just not the same, especially for a festival that I'm a patron of. Like in 2019, the last time MIF happened in person, I think I went to 45 films over the because MIF's a little bit longer. MIF is 2.5 weeks, so I went to
gotcha.
45 films, which is about 3 a day, and I took the whole 2 weeks off work to do it as well. So it's but there are crazy people at MIF that do upwards of 70, and it's a bit insane.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. And for me, since obviously I am in the Toronto area, I got to do a little bit of the blended experience, a little bit online, a little bit in person. I knew there were a few films that I really wanted to try to see in the theater, which was Titane was one of them, which I did get to see. I think that's one that I don't even think they played it digitally. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But that's one that I definitely wanted to get downtown Toronto to see in person. Um, but yeah, I definitely split it kind of 50-50 festival wise, whether I watched something online or in person. And it was kind of fun that way. I definitely think there's a market for keeping the online experience as the years come. Like, as we said, Last Night in Soho, Dune, movies like that, they're never going to be on the online portal. But I think in years to come, it's something that TIFF should probably keep because it kind of lets you explore a lot of films that you probably would not have explored if they weren't there. So just what were you most hyped about movie wise going into this festival? What were the films that you were really dying to see? besides the ones obviously that got kind of blocked
Besides the
for you.
ones, yeah, the ones that I originally planned to see at MIF, and then that was cancelled. Planned to see at TIFF, and then I wasn't allowed to watch them anymore. Maybe when in their cinematic releases, maybe somewhere down the line, I will watch those. But two documentaries that I watched. So overall, I should say I watched 13 films in the. I watched a couple post festival as well, just from screeners that I had available that weren't also. They were also on the TIFF digital platform, but I just just didn't watch them during that
Mhm.
time because I knew I could watch them later.
So you
So I
watched
watched
13. Me too.
13 in total. Yes.
I also watched 13.
Oh, well, how about that? And I don't think there was any overlap. I don't think there was a single film that we both saw.
Right. So we're bringing a lot of variety here.
Yeah. So I guess so two documentaries mainly. There is one other one, but that's my favorite movie, and we're going to talk about at the end. So we'll leave that till last. But so the two documentaries that really caught my eye early on. The first one was The Rescue, which I believe is actually coming out in cinemas in the US next week. Or not next week, but sometime in early or mid October. I'm not
Mhm.
sure. It's the new documentary film from the team behind Free Solo, and it's about the rescue of the Thai soccer team in from the flooded cave back in 2018. And what's interesting about this documentary, reading interviews and like the press notes and things like that, is that the directors were never actually there. Like they followed this whole story, and it's sort of a COVID production. So what they sort of did was use a mixture of both real footage and then also reenactments, and it is so seamlessly blended in the two of them. And and also the interviews themselves, the talking heads interviews with a lot of the people involved, that was all done over Zoom, and you could not tell because it is so professionally done,
Hmm.
and everything is really well done in that regard. Like I was stunned when I found that out too. And yeah, it's just like these two, just apologies, I'm forgetting their names. I'll bring them up in a moment. I know one of them is Jimmy Chin, and I forget the name of the other woman in the team. But it's just another great documentary from these two about the endeavor of the human spirit to achieve something impossible. Because because about halfway through the documentary, they've found the boys, and you think, oh well, this is going to be simple. Oh no, 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 no! There is so many other hurdles. Like just as you think that they've figured it out, another problem gets thrown in their way.
Hmm. That is yeah, it's fascinating, and this is definitely a movie that has caught my attention throughout the festival. Insane critical uh, reception for this movie. It's the second highest Metacritic Metascore out of TIFF. It has a
Was it
92.
really?
Yeah, second
Wow.
highest.
I
Um,
think it won the documentary award too, I believe.
yeah, I think you're right.
Yes.
It did. So it's certainly one that is definitely going to hopefully be on a lot of people's radars and maybe make its way into the Oscars. We'll see.
Mm. Yeah, and the second documentary, I kind of had to watch this out of obligation, being Australian, and I believe it was the only Australian film in the whole program. It's the documentary Burning. It's from documentarian. I think she's based in the US now, but Australian documentarian Eva Orner, who just makes incredibly angry documentaries about how terrible Australia's government is. Like a couple of years ago, she made a documentary called Chasing Asylum about like asylum seekers in Australia, and like Australia's detention system and how horrible that is. And so, as the title might suggest, Burning, this is actually about the Black Summer bushfires that just tore through Australia in late 2019, early 2020. And look, I'm in an area, like I'm in a densely populated city. I am from the country, regional Australia originally. Never had to first-hand experience with bushfires, thankfully, but I've been around when they've happened. Like I just remember last year when and it was reported all over the world when it happened last year. There was just, even though the fires were like hundreds of kilometers away, the smoke just completely engulfed the whole city of Melbourne, and also up in Sydney because there were fires in just everywhere. And the documentary, not only does it have like first-hand accounts of survivors and journalists and like people that were on the ground and like firefighters and like environmental, like the people in like high up environmental sort of areas, it also is looks at just how it was all preventable. And and just like how, or not how it was preventable, just in that the Australian government were warned about it and they knew it was going to come and just did absolutely nothing about it. And then from there, it kind of turns on to this huge, scathing sort of scream into the void about how terrible the Morrison government actually is and how little they actually care and how they just refuse to just keep living in the past, like, you know, climate denying, like keep funding the coal and the fossil fuel industry. And, you know, just there's also, and, you know, Scott Morrison also going on holiday to Hawaii in the middle of a national emergency. So
Yeah.
it's a really angry documentary that covers it from all angles. And this is, I believe it's Amazon like funded and will also be distributing this. So a lot of eyes will be on it. So, and, you know, I think it's a film that will open their eyes to just how, you know, just how terrible not only these fires were, but also just the general incompetence and almost like vicious incompetence almost of the Australian government. And I was going to write a review for MovieBabble, but I don't think there's any way that any Australian can watch this film and then review it and then it be nothing else than just an extended rant or like a manifesto of how, you know, crap this government really is.
So this is really a movie that this is for angry Australians then.
Yeah, or angry people all over the world. Like it's a film that will open a lot of eyes, and like there's a lot of like statements in here that like really linger on because there's a teenage girl who's like a big climate activist and that's an environmental activist who's interviewed during the film, and like she was a really key player in like the student-led protests for climate change that happened a couple of years back, which you know the Morrison government denounced and being like, oh, why aren't these kids in the classrooms or some bullshit like that.
Yeah.
And you know towards the end of the documentary she says like something that is both humbling but also annoying as hell is when people come up to me and say, it's like adults come up to her, a 17-year-old girl, and say, what you are doing is really inspiring. And she responds with like, I shouldn't be the one that has to do this.
Mm. Yeah, chills. You get chills from that sort of stuff. So both of them it sounds like both of them kind of lived up to your expectations in a way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's good. For me, going into the festival, I was super hyped about Titane, obviously, and The Worst Person in the World. Titane was one that, I mean, I loved Raw. I don't know how you feel about Raw.
I like it a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously her next film here, I'm definitely going to be excited about it. Then it won the Palm at Cannes, right? I mean, that's insane. Spike Lee did something wild there with his jury. Um,
Yeah, well,
so
announcing it first too was pretty wild.
yeah, a little bit of a mistake on his part, but that just my excitement, which was already high, got even higher. So I was really excited for that, and that experience was something else. I think this is a movie that obviously can be experienced anywhere and enjoyed anywhere, but seeing how people reacted to this thing, it was incredible. So TIFF runs a selection of midnight madness screenings, and that's where I was. I was there watching it at midnight, and it was nuts. There was an ambulance at the theater afterwards. Someone had passed out, I believe,
Yeah,
and
I think that makes Ducournau 2 from her films with TIFF Midnight Madness screening because I believe someone also passed out or fainted during a scene in Raw
you're
as
right.
well, and they had to
Yeah,
call an ambulance.
I think that they need to promote her as someone who's now caused two people to faint in back-to-back films at TIFF. That's got to be in all the marketing material because that would draw people in 100%. And I want people to be drawn into this because it's a really insane experience. And I mean, I had never seen a crowd so audible towards a film. Like the reactions were just insane. It's a really good movie. I mean, I'm not going to get into the actual, you know, plot lines of it because it doesn't come out yet. I think it's out in France, but it is dropping in North America in about 2 weeks from now. And
Yeah,
obviously,
it's in Australia in early December.
okay, yeah. So we've got a while for this film to really make its way around. But for a movie that is so in your face, uncomfortable, gory almost, I mean, if you've seen Raw, you know how she can be and make you feel uncomfortable with her shots, close-up shots. But this movie's also very, very heartwarming, very touching, and very funny as well, which I did not expect. So I mean, it's a movie that I was really excited for, and for me, it definitely lived up to the hype. The other one is Joachim Trier's "The Worst Person in the World," which so this is the third film in his loosely connected Oslo trilogy, which he's been working on now for I think 12 or so years. And over the summer, I watched the first two because I knew this one was coming up. I watched Reprise and then Oslo August 31st, which is the two other films in that trilogy. Obviously, none of the characters are the same. It's just kind of thematically, this is a loosely connected trilogy, and all the films take place in his home city of Oslo. I don't know if you've seen any of the other ones
I
at
have
all.
not, no. I'm
They're
aware of
both.
this filmmaker because he made two other films which I've heard good things about but haven't seen. I don't think there's those two. I think they're called Louder Than Bombs and Thelma, which were
Mhm.
both pretty critically acclaimed.
Right. Yes. You know what? He's a really good director in a way that his films are touching and realistic, and he really just likes to explore kind of the real heart and soul of the human being. But he does it in a very entertaining way. The editing style of this film is pretty unique. It's incredibly funny, very fast paced. That's my favorite movie at the festival. So I got to talk about it again at the end. But it was a movie that I was super excited for and did live up to the hype. Um, Otherwise, though, there were a few movies throughout the festival that kind of surprised me. Um, I'm going to throw it back to you, though. What was some of the biggest surprises for you at TIFF this year?
Yeah, so I'm just looking back at the sheet where I've sort of looked at this stuff to try to remember what I've got here. So we'll start with the positive ones first. And I have a review for this one on the site, so I'll try to be very limited with this one. But there's this really great Indian film called Doug Doug, which I didn't know much about going in, but a friend of mine, Virat Nehru, who runs the Film Fight Club show up at a radio show up in Sydney, turned me onto this one, and I loved absolutely every second of it. A really great satire on just how easily religion can be like commercialized and commodified, and just like the sort of insane fervor and like sort of almost hysteria that it can manifest was just brilliant. The basic conceit of this film is that there's this alcoholic man. I think his name is Thakur. He goes on a ride on his motorcycle late at night when he's a little bit intoxicated. He gets killed rather gruesomely when he's run over by a truck. So the police attend to the crime scene. They impound his bike. You know, they clean it all up. They impound his bike at the local station. Police wake up the next morning to find that the bike is missing, and that the bike has inexplicably shown back up to the site of the accident. So, and even though they've siphoned the gas tank, they locked it up. They locked it up. They changed it around a tree and everything like that, and it still made its way there. So they try even more desperate measures. So they like chained it up. They siphon the gas tank again. They throw it in a jail cell, like and like deep, like I think like flatten its tires, all of that sort of stuff. But the bike shows back up to the site of the accident, and this starts to get the attention of the locals. And the locals start to believe that the spirit of Thakur has sort of, I guess, lives inside this motorcycle, and they have proclaimed this motorbike as their god. And like soon everyone just starts going like absolutely crazy about this. Like caravans of pilgrims are starting to come to like, you know, to praise the holy motorcycle. People are putting Thakur's name all over their businesses for good fortune. They make offerings of his favorite thing when he was alive, which is alcohol, which is kind of hilarious. And then it makes them grant their wishes, and you know, then it just spirals out of control, but not in a horrible sort of violent way, but just in a very absurdist, very vibrant sort of way. This film is probably the most energetic film I saw of TIFF. There's a like the director has very pointedly said that Edgar Wright is one of his key inspirations,
Mm.
and you can tell with the very fast-paced editing. There's so many like whip pans and like crash zooms everywhere in this film. Like the soundtrack as well by Salvage Audio Collective is just so really upbeat and poppy, and just it's just it gives the film the infectious energy that it has. and I hope this gets distribution sometime because it was just excellent. Doug, look out for that one.
Yeah, so it doesn't have distribution yet.
I'm not too sure. It didn't seem. I think it just has like an international sales agent who I can't remember who it is, but I don't think it's been picked up for distribution in North America or really anywhere yet.
Hmm.
So definitely keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, hopefully soon. For me, a positive surprise, I guess. You know, it's kind of weird to talk about dash cam, Rob Savage's dash cam, which I don't know if you saw his film Host last year.
I did not, but I heard good things about that, and I've heard quite terrible things about this film. But I understand you liked it, so I'm very interested to hear what you have to say.
I think, a lot of people dislike it because of its lead character. Um, so you essentially have it's a found footage film, right? Dash cam about a I guess you could say a vlogger who um films herself, and she sings in her car to the radio. She does freestyles in the car, just random words. People join in, they type things, she turns it into a rap. Really just kind of follows her throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And she is anti-vax, very skeptical of everything. She is um like conspiracy theorist to the max. This is the type of person she is, very over the top, a lot of swearing, a lot of yelling. um and what's weird, I didn't know this when I watched the film. I just thought this was full on actor. Apparently in real life she is kind of like that.
Oh, so it's a major case of stunt casting then, is it?
Yeah, and I mean, I think Rob Savage and her are friends or dating. I'm not 100% sure.
That
But I read somewhere they have a connection. And I mean, Annie Hardy is the character's name. Annie Hardy is her name in real life. So I mean, like, they know what they're going for here. And I didn't know that when I watched it, but then you kind of think about it afterwards and you're like, oh, okay, so that is like her personality. Now, obviously, she's playing a much more over the top version of herself. Like, I don't think she'd run into stores, and this is what happens in the film, runs into stores and yells about mask mandates and such. I don't know if she does that in real life. I looked at her social media and she doesn't seem to be, that crazy about it all. She is definitely a skeptic in real life, but her character is definitely like an over the top version. And I think that's what turned a lot of people off to the film and probably didn't like it. You know, it's not that I'm rooting for her, but I laughed my ass off during the movie, so that's why I liked it. I found it quite funny. It does get repetitive. I think there are a lot of jump scares in here that get repetitive as time goes on. But I don't know. I just had a lot of fun with it. Maybe it's because it was a Midnight Madness screening. It's 1 a.m. and I'm just kind of, my brain's kind of mushy. But I had a lot of fun with this movie. Um, I might have to revisit it and see how I feel again. But you know what? I'm going to stand up and go against the grain, which has been pretty negative, and say, I had a good time watching this thing. It's just it's funny. So she just kind of, you're following her and her journey, and weird things start to happen. That's pretty much all I got to say. And supernatural things too. So I mean, it's odd. I think I have to check out Host because it seems to be a little bit more respected than this film. But I'm not going to lie, I had fun.
Oh, well, you got to stick up for your oddball opinions. You got to.
Exactly. No, 100%. And I will. I mean, I feel like it's the type of movie you got to watch with friends or something like that. Like, I
I,
mean, I got to check it out again, but I have to stick up for that oddball opinion.
well, that leads me into asking: did you watch that virtually or did you watch that in person?
So that was in person at the Midnight Madness screening. And
Okay, what was the vibe from the rest of the audience?
it's funny because I was with my girlfriend and we were watching it, and the audience, people were laughing. People were jumping like, you could hear it was very similar to the reaction from Titane the night before. Like, I felt that the audience was definitely vibing pretty well with this. And then once it ended, she jumped on Letterboxd, and within like a minute, people had reviews up. It was like half star. It's like, no. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. There were people in this room that weren't feeling great about it. And it's interesting. I think that's the cool thing about a festival, right? You have so many different minds, strong opinions, all in one room. And but I mean, if you were there, you'd think the audience enjoyed it, but clearly
Mm.
not everyone did.
Yeah, it's always weird when you have screenings like that, and also just the time in which people can just crank out a letterbox review is insane.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
I remember I went and saw a film with a friend of mine, and like the film had ended. I turned my phone back on, and I was about to log it on Letterboxd, and as soon as I'd opened it, my friend who was sitting right next to me, who I was kind of talking to the whole time while this was happening, and she had already posted a review. I was like, when did you do that?
Yeah,
Like, first how, and two, when?
it's nuts. It's nuts. Also, the director, Rob Savage, he came out afterwards and he spoke to the crowd. Um, I didn't stay for it all because it was like nearly 2 o'clock. I had to drive home, but yeah, he came out afterwards. I wonder how that went. I feel like I should ask someone who was there what it was like and what people ask, because yeah, this lead character is awful, but I laughed, so I had a good time.
Yeah. Oh, well, last question before we move on. From what you saw, was there any walkouts? Because it seems like from the overwhelmingly negative reception this has got, apart from you, obviously, did you notice anybody walking out?
So I think it screened twice, and I also did have digital. Maybe a lot of the bad reviews at the digital, because I sat
Right.
in the very middle of the theater and I had a good view of both doors and I didn't see anyone walk out besides
Okay.
one person maybe for a washroom break or something. But yeah,
Maybe it's a film that requires the sort of even though it's made on like dash cam and found footage, you'd think that it would be tailor made for like watching on your computer or your TV at home. Maybe a cinema is the right place to watch that one.
I think it might be like they had the in person the night that I went, then the next day they screened it digitally. And I talked to a friend who watched it digitally and really didn't like it. I don't know. I feel like the audience added something to it. Like everyone was very loud in reacting to this film in the crowd there. So maybe that is a part of it, but either or, I mean, it seems like Host is the more respected film, so I gotta check it out.
All right, what are we on to next? The low point, or do we have other surprises that we want to mention? Because you've also mentioned here, is there a negative surprise that
Yeah, do you have
you had?
anything at TIFF that kind of bummed you out? What shocked you in a bad way?
Two that just not sort of shocked me in a bad way, but just made me surprised because I'm like, I thought I would really enjoy this film and I just didn't. I'll start quickly with these two films. One that I don't really have too much to say with because I think I watched it. It might have been a combination of late at night and the film just was not working for me. Well, it was a film called The Swigwa Diaries. So Swigwa being August spelt backwards, and there's a reason for that. I just feel like that there's so many filmmakers want to make the definitive COVID film. And I,
Hmm.
I think, like, personally, I think cinemas going, not cinemas, sorry, but films going forward when it comes to COVID-19 as, like, sort of a plot thread or, like, just sort of a central idea, just ignore it. We all live through it. Just, you know what? We don't need to hear any more about that. But, like, okay, no, I should retract there. I'm open to them, but the problem is with a lot of filmmakers and festival films, they have very insular worlds. So a lot of COVID films you're going to be seeing are about filmmakers and struggling artists, and they just make me want to throw up, to be honest, because they're all the same. And Jafar Panahi has done films like that while under house arrest a lot better and with a lot more humanity about 10 years ago. So just give up. But yeah, so the Swigwa Diaries is basically like a film told in reverse. It was shot over 22 days, I think, over August, yeah, over August last year, and it's basically a film like a set of a film that's sort of yeah, but shown backwards. So the film sort of starts at the end of the production, and then like the cast like if weirdly like building like a greenhouse or whatever, and then it keeps going back, and then you find out that they're in a COVID, like they're trying to make like a COVID safe production of a film, and it keeps going backwards and backwards, and like you eventually get to like the genesis of the idea. It gets really meta, but like, and I kind of enjoyed some of those aspects, but it just was really dull. And I just a lot of people are saying like a lot of people that use the word vibes too much are really really loving this film because it's definitely just trying to go for this very laid back sort of atmosphere, but it just did not work for me at all, unfortunately. There is some great moments, like towards the end of the film when it gets to the beginning of the production, there's some boomer on the set yelling about mask mandates and things like that, and they're having a big argument about that. That was pretty entertaining, but other than that, I just really couldn't get into the Swigwa Diaries. The second film I want to talk about is Sundown, which I believe made its world premiere at Venice a few weeks beforehand and now is playing at and played at TIFF. So this film, it's a new film from Michel Franco, who seems to make films about class divide, but that are very, very not forceful is not the right word, but like and to say unsubtle, I think would be unfair on him. But he makes very blunt films about his about criticisms of like capitalism and like class divides and things like that. Like his last film, New Order, which was basically like a depiction of an uprising in Mexico, but told from the perspective of the 1%. That had very polarizing reactions from both audiences and critics. But his new film is a much more laid back film, Sundown. Tim Roth is the lead in this film. He plays a man that's he's the heir to a meat packaging empire. So he's the heir to, he's just like a spoilt rich old guy that's, basically never really worked a day in his life. And he's on vacation in Acapulco in Mexico. He's with his sister, played by Charlotte Gainsbourg, and her kids. But so they're having just the best time, just like sipping margaritas by the beach, by the pool, just soaking in the sunshine. But then they get a phone call that their mother is sick. And but then on the way, so then they pack their things, they get to the airport. Once they get to the airport, they've found out that their mother has died. But Tim Roth isn't exactly finished with this vacation yet. So he lies about leaving his passport back at the resort. And so Charlotte Gainsbourg and her kids get on a plane, go back to London. He stays in Acapulco and checks into just this really dingy motel and just hangs around for 80 odd minutes.
Huh.
And I mean, this film is definitely a film of two halves. The first half is just sort of Tim Roth. He's very stoic in this film, but not in like a very intense stoic, but just stoic as in he's very just relaxed. And I mean, okay, stoic maybe not be the right word, but like I'm not going to say unexpressive, but he just seems unbothered by everything. Like he's very good at playing this sort of apathetic, sort of misanthropic asshole in this film, and he's great in it, don't get me wrong. But the film is, for the first 40 minutes at least, just him sort of wandering around Acapulco. He gets in a relationship with like a local merchant as well, and like, starts making friends with some of the locals. The film then takes a turn when Charlotte Gainsbourg does sort of come back into the picture in the second half of the film, and then so the film, nothing really happens in the first 40 minutes, then everything happens in the last 40 minutes. And it's definitely a film of two halves. I don't think it was just kind of a bit disappointing. It just kind of felt like a hollow and empty sort of experience. I'm not quite sure. I don't think it really had any sort of commentary on the capitalism or the class divide whatsoever, or just like, it's just another rich people are smug dicks. And they don't want that. They'd rather just sit around and just waiting for just sit around here and ignore all the problems going on in their life instead of actively doing anything about it.
Yeah.
And there's and I think there's also another part of it as well, like being in lockdown and seeing a film about rich people on holidays is just incredibly patronizing. And it's just, I don't know, maybe it just made me jealous. But yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of Sundown, unfortunately.
Yeah, Tim Roth, he was in also Bergman Island, wasn't he, in this at TIFF?
Oh yeah, similar sort of vacation film too.
So I mean, he definitely had a good last couple of years with his choices and where he's fit.
Yeah, I was gonna say he was very smart about like his post-COVID world. It's like, where are we going? We're going to like some beach in Sweden, and we're going to Acapulco. Awesome.
Yeah, wonderful, great. Must be nice, Mr. Tim Roth. Must be nice. So let's get into. So we'll continue on the negatives. Low point for you at the festival. For me, it was The Girl and the Spider, which I feel bad because this is a film that seemingly has been quite well received by critics so far out of the festival circuit. But for me, I was not a huge fan. So it's directed by brothers Ramon and Sylvain Zurcher, who are Swiss. And I think it might be the first Swiss movie I've ever seen. I just don't remember ever watching a Swiss film before. Um,
I got to think on that now to see if I have.
yeah, I sat down to watch them. Like, have I ever watched a Swiss movie before? I don't think so. But it's essentially just a film about um, really takes place over 2 days of a girl watching her roommate move and helping her move. And I guess it's supposed to be about, moving on and such, but I don't know. It was I, slow is fine, but it was just not doing it for me. And the film is very much constant monologue that and monologues that just don't really do much for the story. Not much is kind of proceeding. The monologues for me don't carry into each other. They're all very sectioned off, and I just don't. I didn't really get anything out of this, sadly. And one thing I do have to say, it has a very nice theme. The music is phenomenal. They have like one song on the score that plays every like 10 minutes. Like just that one, everything else is silence, and this one thing comes in for 30 seconds. It's 30 seconds of bliss. Wonderful music. But in between that, I must say the movie didn't really do too much for me. And that won't scare me away from Swiss movies though. So I'll make sure I watch another one.
Yeah, it sounds like from just the description that so this was a film I was kind of looking at. I missed it. It was part of MIF's online section as well, and then also TIFF's as well. It was one that I was looking at, but just maybe you've I guess maybe justified my decision in not watching it. But from what you've described with that, it sounds like it's something that I sort of pigeonhole. Like, not that you should really pigeonhole films, but something I sort of look at films and like to me they seem like festival filler.
Right.
Like they're these sorts of, like mostly European sort of art films that, and this is a problem with a lot of contemporary art films, is that they follow in the footsteps of people like, Andrei Tarkovsky, or like more recently someone like Apichatpong Ethical, where they can just, they just have a very still camera, and a very still camera with like not a whole lot of movement going on in the frame, just a very slow paced sort of film, but not doing anything with it, just being slow for the sake of it, not really doing, just being slow just for the sake of being slow, and not for, to sort of let certain themes or like, ideas sort of echo within the heads of the viewers or anything like that. So, it's
You
and that is a
are, yeah. You hit the nail on the head with the film. That is exactly this movie.
Yeah, they all look pretty, but there's not really much underneath the surface as well with a lot of these films. But that sucks that girl and the spider, or girl with the spider,
The Girl and the Spider, yeah.
and the spider. Okay, yeah. Well, mine is probably also a European art film, but one that is a lot different from what you've said. So, unfortunately, and I was looking forward to this because I liked the premise, and also like a lot of people seem to really dig it. This is a Belgian film called Inexorable. Was my low point. Similar, like a Shining sort of esque plot. So there's this famed writer who's basically a one-hit wonder. He wrote this book when he was young called Inexorable, and it was a huge hit. Like, and it's later on in his life he's moved in. His wife is the daughter of like some publishing magnate, and she's also a writer herself. And I think that's how they met as well, and like she published the book and whatever. So I think he's the father has recently died. They move into his estate in the Belgian countryside, and basically him hoping that it will, like Jack Torrance in the Shining, it might, like, a change of scenery might trigger some sort of inspiration or something like that. He also finds out that there is this young woman who has also recently moved to town, and she saves their kidnapped dog, or not their kidnapped dog, sorry, the dog ran away. She finds it, and then the family sort of take her on as a maid, because she's also good with their child and like with the dog, and like she wants to help out around the house and things like that. So it's sort of like a parasite sort of thing, because you also find out that this woman is very much a fan of this writer's work, and things very quickly get a bit more morbid and dark and very erotic thrillery from the 90s. It's trying to be like this erotic thriller from the 90s mixed with Parasite, but really veers off into just crazy exploitation, which normally I'd be a fan of. But like when you mix those sorts of things like erotic 90s thriller, crazy sort of exploitation-y stuff, and Parasite, and the pretentiousness of European filmmaking, it kind of comes off as like a bad Lifetime movie.
Mm,
Unfortunately, and also like I'm clearly not the person to that's any authority on this, but like the film also, the depiction of women in the film is either they're evil monsters out to get you, like, and ruin your life, or they're all crazy. Like that's kind of how the film represents women, and it's a little misogynistic in that sense, but which did rub me the wrong way. But like there's just no, I just couldn't find anything in Inexorable,
yeah.
unfortunately. The performances are good and committed as they would have to be for a film this crazy, and there is a really really great dance sequence to like some like screamo sort of metal song that's done by a 10-year-old girl, which is pretty incredible. But the rest of the film unfortunately is just sort of crass and really sort of just was not my thing.
Yeah. What a shame. So we both kind of were kind of roasting the European art films there tonight, but that's kind of what happens sometimes. um, so let's get away from the low points and kind of move back into a little bit more a positive territory. So I named this category the Holy Shit That Rocked movie. So maybe not our favorite of the festival, but the movie that, you know, that was good when you watched it. For me, The Power of the Dog has to be that film. And, you know, it's not like I was surprised by it. That's why I didn't put it in the surprises. I knew this was going to be good, but I think what am I now? 7, 8 days out from watching this, and it's still on my mind. Like it was phenomenal. Obviously Jane Campion back behind the camera there for the first time in 10 years, I believe. Benedict
Yeah, I think
Cumberbatch.
Bright Star, I think might have been her last film.
A long time ago.
Yeah. She
Benedict
did do Top of
Cumberbatch.
the Lake in between, but you know, it's been a while since she's done a film, yeah.
Yeah, big time. And it's great to see her back. So you got Benedict Cumberbatch, Jesse Plemons, Kirsten Dunst. I mean, you have a really solid cast here. And some people that, I mean, obviously Dunst and Plemons are together in real life, but some people that maybe you wouldn't picture in a film together. I really love this movie. It is, not only is it gorgeous to look at, I mean, it's filmed in Campion's native New Zealand, right? And it has some gorgeous backdrops, but this movie is powerful. And there's a lot in this movie that I'm not going to spoil, but there's a lot in this movie that kind of marinates in your head after a while. And it's not a movie that's going to sit down and tell you what you want to know in the moment, which I really appreciated. But the more you think about it, the more you just love this movie, for me at least. And a lot of people do seem to be liking it around the festival circuit. And this movie's playing everywhere pretty much. I know this was one that was kind of yanked away from you right before the festival started, but this played at Telluride. I believe it was at Venice as well.
Yeah.
And again here at TIFF. So it's really making the rounds and attempting to kind of try to get seen.
Yeah, I believe it won the Silver Lion at Venice, so the second place.
Hmm. Yeah, Campion won director there as well. So I mean, it's certainly making the festival rounds, and it's being received really well. I think this is a masterwork in direction from Jane Campion. She really, I don't use that word very often, but she really did um, do a damn good job with this film. And that's just in the way that there's so much going on that's not being said. And that's what I love. And she, like, visually, she sets that up for the viewer so well. Must watch. I know I watched this one digitally. It was playing digitally and in person. I know it's obviously a Netflix film, but I definitely want to see this at in the theater at some point when it does come out, because I know it's going to get a little bit of a limited run here before it drops on Netflix. But just those backdrops, just the cinematography, it's something that I want to see on the big screen. But it obviously played very well on my computer as well. Amazing film.
Yeah, I'm keen. Yeah, so it's also going to get a cinema release some shortly before it comes out on Netflix in like early December, I believe, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think, yeah. Do you think this is going to be a sort of film that is? I mean, it's way too early to talk about awards, and that you can get stuck into that trap when talking about TIFF in terms of awards prospects because it is a pretty important festival in terms of that to go sort of kickstart that. But what
Right.
do you reckon in terms of its awards prospects?
Honestly, this is not me saying this in a snobby way, but I don't know if this movie, I think this movie is too,
Too good for it.
I guess, but I think it's a movie that's going to get a lot of award recognition. I think people are going to be looking at this thing and giving it a lot of nominations, whether it be production, costume, the acting, the writing, 100%, Campion's directing. But I don't know if this is the type of movie to win at a lot of awards bodies, Best Picture or something like that. But it will get recognized in some way. It's just that good. And it's just that kind of a big deal. Like the fact that it's playing at every festival is a smart rollout, in my opinion, for a Netflix
Hmm.
film. Get as many eyes on it as possible. So I do think it's going to be talked about deep into the award season, but I don't know. I think it is too good, yeah, for the Oscar Best Picture, but it will be recognized in some way.
All right. Well, I'm excited to see it whenever I can, whether that will be in cinemas. Hopefully, we're out of lockdown by then. Cinemas supposedly going to be reopen here once we hit 80% double vax, which is projected to be on November 5th. So hopefully that will be soon.
Yeah.
In terms of my holy shit that rocked movie, I have a couple. I'm got three because I want to mention them and I kind of want to sort of bang 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 get them all out of the way altogether, and they're all sort of within that genre mold, which I sort of love. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Saloum. This is a film from Senegal. It's set within the backdrop of in Guinea-Bissau. There was a military, not a military uprising, but a military coup d'état, and there was so it's set around that, and within that there is this team of like I guess like sort of like not counter revolutionaries, but like sort of rebel fighters or mercenaries that are sort of fighting against this like military coup. They steal. Oh, I can't remember. They steal some gold from somewhere. They get in an airplane to try to hightail it to Dakar in Senegal, the capital of Senegal. Unfortunately, their plane is out of fuel, or their plane has been shot, so they have to make an emergency landing in the town of Saloum. And they enter these three mercenaries. They enter this community. Oh, sorry, there's the three mercenaries, and they also have their sort of contact, who's sort of like I guess like a drug runner from South America or Mexico or somewhere. So they have to make this emergency landing. They then go to this community in Saloum where it's basically like refuge there. They don't have to pay for their accommodation, but in reward they have to like do work around the area, sort of thing. And so it's them hiding out. There's sort of an uneasy alliance between not only the people in the sort of gang who are called. I'll get the notes of what they're actually called. They are the the Bangui hyenas is the name of them. They're sort of like they're in hiding at this compound. There's a deaf and mute woman that sort of is recognizing who they are and is like threatening to expose them. And then also there's police from Dakar that come looking for them. So there's all of this stuff going on. The film is a really, really good at sort of ratcheting up the tension towards that. But then this is where there's about halfway through, there is a very key revelation that happens, and then a key moment that results from that, and the film changes completely. It turns into something completely different, and I don't want to ruin what that is. Things get really weird and tense between characters, and things then get violent and a little bit supernatural after that, and it is just like it's cool. It is
Yeah.
really, really good. And it's the sort of film that, like, it was part of the Midnight Madness, similar to where Titane and like other films and Dashcam were showing. And I would love to have seen this with an audience to see that turn happen and to see, how audiences would have reacted to that.
Yeah, that sounds damn good. Love those Midnight Madness screenings.
Yeah. So another one, I don't think this was in Midnight Madness, but it's sort of along the lines of like these sort of genre films. It was a Spanish film called Out of Sync. So this film is about a woman who is a her job is a Foley artist and sound mixer for films. One day she finds out that her hearing is a little bit delayed. Like she claps her hands in front of her and then hears it like half a second later, and like it's starting to affect her work obviously and like her professional life, and it's starts to drive her a little bit mad as the days go on and on and on and on. Like the delay gets longer and longer and longer, and this movie also starts to get into the supernatural, where she can start to hear like things from the past as well. Like if she goes in there, she can hear things from the past, and it gets really weird. And I really enjoyed this film as well. A film about sound and where somebody works with sound. The film clearly has really, really great sound design. I watch this on my TV. I don't have a really great sound system on my television. So I was probably thinking I probably should have watched this on my laptop with headphones on,
Mm.
or, this would be really great in a cinema, because the soundscape just puts you in, not only just like inside her head of like, because, she's hearing delayed sounds, there's all of this work going on around her and she's just hearing complete silence.
Yeah, I heard the sound. I mean, you've said enough that the sound design is definitely the draw. But one cool thing to note here, this is a movie that played at so they have a big IMAX theater downtown Toronto called the Cinesphere, which TIFF kind of partnered with this year to play some special showings. Dune had its IMAX world premiere there. We also had Titane played there. I think Memoria starring Tilda Swinton played there. Out of Sync also played there. So that definitely would have been a
Oh
cool
wow, that
experience.
would have been bloody awesome.
Yeah, so that was there as well. Just had to note that. But yeah, so those were some of your. So did some of those films kind of surprise you as well, or did you expect them all to be
I
good?
think well, with Saloon, I didn't read too much into it. I was offered by the PR people of that film to watch it, and I'll hope to review it at some point for the site. But yeah, that was one where I purposefully didn't read too much into it, because I just heard like genre bending film, and it's out of Senegal, and Senegal recently have had some pretty great output from their very limited sort of cinema. And I was really interested to see what it was, so it really surprised me with just in the directions that it went. But I have one more I just want to briefly talk about as well, a Persian film or Iranian film called Zalava. Is it? I just need to double check. I don't know if it's Zalava or Zavala. I just need to double check.
That also played at
Um,
Midnight Madness. Yeah.
yeah, it did. So this film is really, really great as well. I apologies, I'm not using better language. So this film is set in Iran in 1978. So it's right before the Iranian Revolution. There is all this sort of paranoia and like sort of uncertainty of where they're about about what's happening. There's this real sort of sense of change in the air. And so the opening text that we get from this film is: a century ago, a band of gypsies traveling from east to west settled in the town of Zalava and became acquainted with the customs of the people of this region. But a powerful fear has stayed with them for years. And that powerful fear is that their village is cursed by demons, basically. And that like the demons can possess you and then also, make you destroy the town, basically, and like cause havoc within the town. But but they believe that like you can expel the demon out of someone if they are possessed by shooting them in the leg. So the film opens with a young girl that the town supposedly believe is possessed. The local police officer doesn't help it, because he's a skeptic and is is very much I guess atheist to this whole sort of idea. Is just a complete skeptic, thinks it's all absolute rubbish. Then this shaman there's also word that the demon has also come out again. This shaman comes in, who the cop believes is just a complete shyster, like an absolute fraud. Comes in, bottles the demon in a jar and says, "I've caught it. You're all done." The cop, who is an incredible skeptic, is like, "All right, show me," like arrests him. And then there's this sort of tension of like, is there really a demon in this jar?
Mm.
Like the TIFF program, the TIFF program summed it up perfectly by calling this film Schrodinger's demon. By like, because there's this clear glass jar. You don't know if there's a demon in there or not, and there's this tension and like this thing of like, should I open it to see if this is actually true and what's going to happen? And yeah, this film just really gets into, in terms of just being a genre piece of just like this sort of paranoid sort of thriller where things just escalate and escalate, and the tension just tightens like a piano wire, just keeps tightening and tightening and tightening, and just at some point it is just going to snap and things are going to go just absolutely haywire. It is an incredible work of tension, especially the last half where, you know, that word has got out that a demon may have been released. And I've done a horrible job at explaining these films, but I want to also be vague as possible, and, you know, just keep it as and not reveal anything, because Zalava is a film that I think is just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. So you definitely got to get a little bit of taste of the Midnight Madness as well. Then they're fun. Those Midnight Madness screenings are
Oh,
always
they are.
very fun.
Yeah.
I love that they do that.
Particularly with Zalava, it's a film that you don't really know where it's going a lot of the times, or like it's an incredible work of pacing as well. Like it's only 93 minutes. The first hour flies by. The first hour flies by, and then it gets to the end, the sort of the finale, the climax of the film, which is almost sort of like, you know, like this intense standoff between like the cop, the shaman, and the villagers. And, you know, the film, like pacing wise, slows, like, you know, in terms of like the actual minutes of how this is spread over, like it slows down, like it feels a lot longer than it is. And but it just is so incredible at ratcheting the tension and just fully getting you sucked into this entire sequence. And, like, you know, you're hanging off every single word and like every single twitch of a muscle that's made by anyone in that sequence. And it's enthralling stuff.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's fun. Um, yeah, gotta love it. And I think that takes us close to the end here, where I just wanted to ask you, just overall, before we do kind of get into our favorite one film, um, TIFF in review. Like, how did you feel overall about things? I mean, we talked about it at the top, but I mean, for me, I think the greatest thing about these festivals is really going in blind to movies, just kind of going in blind to movies from all over the world. Because last year I was very much watching a lot of American movies at the festival, or British films at the festival.
Mm.
This year, I'm glad that I kind of tried to experience a little bit of every corner of the world. I got to see movies from Japan, Korea, Ireland, France, so many more. Even Northern Ireland, I got to see Belfast, which is pretty cool. Obviously, we got the Scandinavian film in Worst Person in the World. We have Compartment Number 6 from Eastern Europe. I mean, definitely happy this year that I got to dive into a lot more than I did last year. But for you, how do you feel just overall about everything you watched?
Yeah, well, I'm looking over the list of 13 films that I saw, and I'm just going to double check how many of them were actually like not in the English language. Like the two documentaries I saw were English language, but in terms of narrative films, only three of them, which were Encounter, Kicking Blood, and Sundown, were the only English language films that I saw. So 5 out of 13 were English language films that I saw, and they were from everywhere. Like, you know, the world, from Israel, from India, from Iran, from Spain, from Indonesia, from Belgium, Portugal. There's an English film by a Mexican director as well, and then also Canada with Kicking Blood as well. So, you know, I had a fairly broad view of the world with my TIFF watches, and, you know, with my situation as well,
Yeah,
it kind of forced me to sort of look for these films. And as much as I want to go in blind, it's, you know, a fact of you kind of have to read up a little bit about these movies, because
right.
you want to try to get the best lineup you possibly can out of the films that you can select.
Yeah, 100%. No, you're right. Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about these festivals, just kind of enjoying movies from everywhere. And that kind of takes us into our favorite film here. And as I said, I think I spoiled this earlier, but mine was The Worst Person in the World, which I really was hoping would shock everyone with maybe getting into the TIFF People's Choice voting there. I know Belfast won. Power of the Dog came second, which was remarkable. And Scarborough,
Scarborough,
yeah, Canadian
yeah, a
film,
local Canadian film, yeah.
came third. That's a movie that I was planning on trying to go see, but I just couldn't fit it in my
Yeah,
schedule. But I
I
will. we'll see that.
I was planning on seeing it, but then the thing ran out. I ran out of time to watch that. It had already expired because that was one that was available very early in the festival,
Gotcha. Yeah.
and
So I'm
I just
definitely
missed it, unfortunately.
definitely going to take a look at that because gotta rep the gotta rep the homeland as well. And I'm just glad that it got into the People's Choice top three. But yeah, The Worst Person in the World, Joachim Trier's film, as I've spoke about, is phenomenal. It's a movie that, I mean, you have your lead here, and she is, quote unquote, the worst person in the world, but not in the way that you think. I mean, a lot of it is just she's living her life like any other person would. And I mean, we tend to get down on ourselves from time to time, and that's how she feels. It's a beautiful movie, a hilarious movie as well, with phenomenally paced editing. It's told in 12 parts with a prologue and an epilogue, so 14 parts, if you will. Each part is equally interesting. Phenomenal performances throughout. This is, for me, his best film out of the three Oslo trilogy films, and I would recommend checking the other ones out. But you definitely don't need to watch them to watch this because they aren't. It's not like MCU. it's not like it's
Yeah.
not like a trilogy. It's just themes, locations, settings. But yeah, I'm definitely happy with how this one turned out, especially just because I was so excited to see it, and I definitely want to check it out again. And I'll continue to sing the praises for it as the months go on, because I think it's a movie that I hope a lot of people watch whenever they can. Yeah, it's really damn good.
Yep. I just want to quickly ask because there's been a lot of chatter about her performance ever since she won at Cannes. But and apologies if I butcher her name. Is Renate Rensve as good as people are saying? Is she as good as people are saying?
She's really good. She is phenomenal. She is great. She was in the last film in this trilogy, as I say, as well. Um, a lot of the actors are similar. Like, I think he brings back a lot of people. Anya Standelson Lee, which is he's the second lead in this film. He was in both of the other movies. He seems to be a very frequent collaborator with this director. Um, yeah, she was really good. She definitely was good. She has like the charm, the wit, the she's got it all. She definitely gave a powerhouse performance here. But I mean, it also helps when you have phenomenal subject matter to deal with, and this movie is rich in every single way. It's really good. 100% recommend checking it out. And one thing to note, just because COVID's been so big, it's this is one of several films at the festival that kind of near the end of the movie, you see people start wearing masks, so you can tell like the filming probably ended as
Sort of in right as COVID
yeah, and
really started to.
it is very
Yeah. Okay.
surreal. I mean, it doesn't add to the story. I'm just kind of pointing that out here on the podcast. I saw a few films at the festival that were like that, and it's pretty surreal. But yeah, that's The Worst Person in the World. Definitely my favorite. Power of the Dog was a runner up for me, but that's my favorite of the festival.
Mm. Zalava and Doug Doug, which I previously mentioned, were my runners up. But my favorite film, which was with all of the films that got taken off that were in my sort of must see bracket, one remained that I was able to see, and it just happened to also be my favorite film of the festival, and that is Nadav Lapid's Ahed's Knee. I don't think you will find a film that is angrier and more vital a film in 2021 than Ahed's Knee, which is just like Nadav Lapid is a filmmaker that I'm absolutely fascinated by now. I think he's only made 4 films. I've seen his most recent 2. His last film, Synonyms, which won the Golden Bear at the Berlinale back in 2019. I wasn't a huge fan of that film, but I loved everything that it was doing. Like that film was sort of loosely inspired by his own life when, like in his 20s, he fled to France and sort of just kind of wanted to renounce himself of any part of him that was Israeli. Like he just wanted to renounce his cultural identity completely. And that film was similarly about a character that was just had a complicated relationship with his Israeli nationality and just wanted to be French. Like he's like, I'm not Israeli anymore. I'm French. This is my journey to becoming French. And like, with the title Synonyms, that's a lot about how language has to do with it. And Synonyms, although a film I didn't love, I liked a lot of what it was doing. Ahead's Knee, though, is a film that sort of brings everything together, and it just makes it. This is a film that I can't really describe. Basic premise is that Abshalom Pollack, who is great, apparently he's a choreographer in real life and is also an actor as well. He plays a guy named Y. I think he actually has a Hebrew name, but in the English subtitles, he's just named as Y. And he's he's a filmmaker, but then also a very thinly veiled version of Lapid in real life. He is making a film about Ahed Tamimi, who is a Palestinian teenage activist who, quite famously, back in 2018, was arrested because she slapped an Israeli officer, an officer, sorry, an Israeli soldier who was, I guess, patrolling her village or something along those lines. And the film gets its title Ahed's Knee from I believe an Israeli lawmaker or lawyer who tweeted out that Ahed Tamimi deserved to be shot, at least in the knee, for what she did. So that's where you get the title Ahed's Knee. So the film opens up with the auditions of this, and rather, it sort of sets the tone for the sort of irreverent nature of the whole sort of film, where it begins with someone auditioning to be for the role of Ahed, but she does a very striking and direct to the camera rendition of Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle. And it's very strange. And Lapid, just from the two films I've seen, he has an incredible knack for using pop music in really, really and making it memorable in his films. Like in Synonyms, he used Technotronic's Pump Up the Jam in a really, really excellent sequence. And he uses it a couple of times in Ahed's Knee, which I'll get to. So he's making this film, and but then during the audition process, he gets an invitation by the Israeli Ministry of Culture to present one of his films to a rural town near the Israeli-Jordan border. I believe it's in the I'm not exactly sure which district it is, but it's near the Jordan border. The film then sort of goes in some strange directions there. It's very much has a very loose sort of structure. The film, but the main sort of, I guess, conflict that's within this film is that Y is given this sheet that to basically a sign-off sheet for basically his talk before and after the film, and he looks over at the government-sanctioned topics that he's allowed to discuss, and is kind of doesn't really want to sign any of them because the government-mandated tasks are fairly, very pro-Israel sort of thing. And, not really mentioning all the things that are wrong with Israel that, like things that his films address. And yeah, so I've got a written review of the film on the site, and this film refuses to conform in basically more ways than one. So not just narratively with this film about, a filmmaker that's like desperate for artistic artistic freedom and sort of, artistic expression and freedom to do that within a country with very, very harsh censorship laws, and like an organization that would prefer propaganda and sort of like, propelling lies than, having like than telling in true artistic expression. But yeah, the way in which Lapid creates this sort of, what would normally be a director standing on a soapbox and preaching the messages of the film, the way he does it, and in terms of the camera work and also the intensity that Pollack brings to his performance of Y in this sequence, is so confrontational. I believe I wrote in my review, it's the way in which this is done. It doesn't just, demand your attention. It sort of like grabs it by the scruff of the neck and does not let go. And it's something that will stay with you. Like, it's incredibly confrontational and is just incredibly impactful. And the film then that's not the end of the film. It does go on, and it does. I'm not going to say it loses its way. It takes a climax that feels a little bit too overdone. But this film is just absolutely incredible, and it blew me away. And yeah, cemented Nadav Lapid as probably one of the most interesting and compelling filmmakers working today.
Yeah, are you thinking of seeing this again at some point, or what?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm interested again with a crowd. Like, I watched this through the TIFF Digital Cinema Pro, so it was just me on my couch in my living room. But yeah, just to see this with an audience, especially that sequence, to just see just the impact that would have on a room of people. And I don't know, hopefully maybe this will come to probably the best bet here in Australia would be the Jewish International Film Festival, as it's an Israeli film.
Mm.
But yeah, so it'll be. I'm interested to. I really want to hear. Like, I hope more people see this, and I want to talk to them more about this sort of film because, as I said earlier in the podcast, like I'm a massive fan of Jafar Panahi's films, and like films about censorship, and maybe it's just me, being absent and my fascination with sort of things. But like, it's always amazes me how these sorts of filmmakers can make such harsh critiques about censorship that are also sort of within the, like in Panahi's case, is within the rules of censorship that sort of express how absurd they actually are. Or you've got Lapid on the other hand, who just brings in the sledgehammer and smashes it. But the funny thing is with Ahed's Knee, this film actually received funding from the Israeli Film Fund, and so it got support from the very organization that it is lambasting, and I think that is just extraordinary and kind of unbelievable. How Lapid managed that is just amazing.
Yeah, he must have a way with the words in the negotiating room there. But yeah, that's pretty impressive. Yeah, but I mean, it definitely sounds like we did get to see a lot of interesting stuff, and I do hope you get to see this again. Does it have a distributor yet?
It might be Kino Lorber. I'm not exactly sure, but I'll have to double check that.
Yeah. So keep that definitely marked down. Ahed's Knee. It was wonderful having you on, Sean. It's been a while. We talked last on your podcast about the Oscars. Several months ago. Felt like a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it's always great to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for dealing with my rambling. And if listeners got this far, thank you for putting up with me. And I hope I can get invited back on the MovieBabble podcast again.
Well, it's wonderful having you, and I always love your insight on these films. And I'm just so glad that we both had such a diverse array of films because, as we said, just the way things kind of went, we didn't watch a single movie that was the same, and we both watched 13 movies. So we definitely brought a lot to the table. But yeah, thanks again always for coming on.
Absolutely. It speaks to how good TIFF was this year with the programming too, that we could have completely different experiences, but then both get so much out of it.
Yeah, 100%. It's really cool. Can't wait for next year already.
And hopefully I can get there in person someday, whether that's next year or like maybe 2030 with how things are looking, but one day.
And hopefully next year the Melbourne Film Festival for you is functioning as it usually would, instead of last minute switches and such. But yeah, it's always great to have you on, and you can check out Sean's work on the site at MovieBabble, or obviously his podcast, Another Bloody Movie Podcast, which is always my favorite movie podcast title. But yeah, Sean, thanks so much for coming on. And as always, you can check out MovieBabble stuff on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everywhere. But most importantly, at the .com, moviebabble.com. As always, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.